breaks a long-standing government commitment which is enshrined in law. The Chancellor promised to restore the funding when the economy improves. But a number of Conservative MPs are trying to overturn the decision and could force a Commons vote. In other measures, a new £3 billion jobs programme is to be set up to help those who have lost their jobs or who are facing redundancy. D'Maris Coffman is a professor in economics at University College London and joins us now. Very good morning to you. So the UK has stopped its policy then of spending 0.7% of national income on overseas aid. What do you make of that?
Well, I agree actually with Baroness Sugg, who resigned over it. She issued her resignation yesterday. I think this is a mistake for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a relatively small commitment, 0.7%, and as you say, it's enshrined in law. And certainly in an atmosphere where going into Brexit, the UK is already being criticised for failing to meet commitments, particularly commitments enshrined in law, and failing to raise our profile on the global stage by this kind of funding cut is a mistake. As Baroness Sugg said, it's true that the UK development spend is highly correlated with growth, which is to say that the money we spend on overseas aid comes back to us in the form of additional opportunities for British business. On top of that, the procurement of services related to the overseas aid program very often goes to British firms, so British firms are missing out on the opportunities that this aid spend could represent, but also in terms of the aid spend, raising our profile abroad, creating new opportunities, business opportunities for firms, new partnerships, in a moment where Britain needs global partnerships going into a quote-unquote global Britain post-Brexit. I think this is a very foolish thing to do. I don't think it's actually a financial decision. I think it's a political decision. As we know, many backbench Tory MPs have wanted to see aid budgets cut for quite some time. This idea of Britain first, look after ourselves at home before we spend money abroad is very much a mantra from certain elements of the Tory party, but it does not make financial sense, and it is depriving the UK of opportunities that we desperately need as we're going into a post-Brexit environment.
And they're saying it will save around £4 billion a year. Can you give listeners just a sense of the scale of the debt brought about by the pandemic?
Of course. I mean, as you said, the UK is borrowing £400 billion total this year, which is considerably more than the $55 billion expected. In fact, it's $340 billion more. Now, part of that is because there's been a tax shortfall of approximately $100 billion, but most of that is actually to pay either for the furlough scheme at about $75 billion, or to pay additional funds to support the NHS in battling coronavirus to the tune of about $125 billion, and then another approximately $65 billion is being spent on what we call corporate welfare, which is to say direct grants to firms. Partly as a result of the economic downturn as a whole. So $4 billion is in the context of an estimated $125 billion to the NHS, $75 billion to the furlough scheme, and $65 billion in corporate welfare.
It just becomes, like I said earlier, almost like telephone numbers, doesn't it? The sort of numbers that we're talking about. The headline on The Guardian this morning, biggest UK slump in 300 years. Yeah. When are we expecting the economy to bounce back?
Well, this is the unfortunate thing. I mean, obviously, interest rates are at epic lows. 0.36% is a very low interest rate at which to have to borrow at this scale. But the normal expectation, which would be that we would rebound in a couple of quarters, is not an expectation that the Chancellor has going into Brexit. So the problem is not only coronavirus, it's the elephant in the room of a possible no-deal Brexit. And the economic damage from a no-deal Brexit could be on scale with coronavirus. So it's very difficult at this stage to say when the economy can recover until there's some clarity about what post-Brexit trade arrangements will look like.
And what do you say to those people who agree and say, actually, our focus needs to be here and now and not overseas? Because there are many listeners, I think, who would share that view.
Well, I think what I would say to them is exactly what Baroness Sugg said to Boris Johnson, and that is that the amount of money that's spent on overseas development comes back to the UK in the form of global partnerships, opportunities for British firms, and actually through government procurement processes. Many times British firms actually win the contracts. My own employer, University College London, wins contracts from DFID to conduct overseas aid in the form of research into how this money can be best spent on the ground. DFID is very prudent with the funds that they receive. The procurement process helps British firms, but more than that, it helps build partnerships so that Britain can engage in trade and other activities abroad that do bring money back to the UK. So this is not frivolous spending. This is not some kind of handout. It's an attempt to raise British the stature of Britain on the global stage, which post-Brexit is very important. And on top of that, this is also about British prestige abroad. Britain's leadership in a post-colonial moment where we have had long-standing ties to many of the countries overseas in which we funnel aid funds, and in an environment in which we will be looking back towards the Commonwealth and some of these historical ties post-Brexit to actually slash our aid budgets to our potential sphere of influence post-Brexit is, I think, an enormous mistake.
Good talking to you this morning. As always, D'Maris Coffman, Professor in Economics at University College London. It's 16 minutes.